as we welcome back our holdover co-hosts from the first half hour. The Admiral Bill Steppenfield, two-star.
Good morning, Rob. Great to be here.
And Mogul, Michael Hornby.
Good morning.
I believe if I remember from last week, Spec 5, Michael Carl.
That's right.
I got it.
It's the same as a first level sergeant.
Yeah, I got it. That's cool. Yeah, you moved up in rank, right?
Yeah, but I left as soon as I could.
There were greener pastures
In fact,
out there.
I had it early out to go to law school.
That worked. That worked out pretty well, I'd say.
Sure did.
Yeah. Also, he was, I believe, ROTC candidate rejected. Did you say, Larry?
No. Both the Navy and I reached an amicable decision after 2 years at Penn State that perhaps I wasn't officer material. Okay. I wasn't heartbroken.
It's an honor to be considered. That's, it's an honor to be considered.
That's what I told him.
Also, via telephone in the Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti phone chair, Mr. David Valente. David, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Like Willis Reed in the 1970 NBA Finals, I am playing hurt today with a broken toe.
Oh, no. Hey, but still, a 54-year-old sports reference rings with me because I'm old.
Go.
Yeah. I remember reading a book about Willis Reed when I was a wee pup, and they talked about that game. What did he play? Like about 3 minutes in that game, but he inspired his team, and then he sat out the rest of the game.
He had like a broken leg, so
It was a pretty bad injury.
Let's not make light of a broken toe. That interferes with more things you're doing. It's a painful break.
What did you kick in anger to break it?
And Chase Lounge.
What did the Chase Lounge do to you?
This is gonna be a good story.
It was probably through frustration of my hockey team, but that I was just getting up and moving through the downstairs of my house and kicked it, and now it's all janky.
Talk about controlling one's emotions.
Who's your hockey team?
The Buffalo Sabres that make me drink.
Yeah.
That's right. How long's their lack of playoff season streak now?
13 seasons going on 14 the way that they're playing. So,
and it cost you a toe.
At least the Jets still have the longest playoff drought in professional sports.
What teams do you follow? Are they all unsuccessful?
No, the Yankees are in the American League Championship Series. So,
yeah, that's a safe one.
But all the other ones are not having a really good season this year. So,
well, all you have to do is pin your hopes on the Yankees. That usually works out pretty well, by the way.
Or you can go for the Steelers.
No,
because I think he said he was a Jets fan, right?
Giants.
Giants
fan.
Giants. All right. Okay. Let's see. My high school team played last night because of the Yom Kippur holiday. We don't play football on Friday nights this week in Frederick County, so we play on Thursday nights. And it was nearly a 3-hour game, so I got home incredibly late without the time to finish this week's intros. So we are doing a best of intros.
We go a little something like this.
Back to the future on these. So I went back over the years of intros and picked out one of these, especially for each of you. And Mike, this might be the first ever intro that I saved from the intros I did for you. So this goes back a couple years. He throws out charges like he tosses out axes. Like Steve Miller's Billy Mack, he makes his living on other people's taxes. If you're not conservative, he'll greet you with a snarl. He's the senior fellow on the panel, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Carl.
Great to be here.
Larry, here's yours, buddy. I'm pretty sure this was the first one I ever did for you. Maybe your problem is you've got some questionable documents at your house. And the issue's worse because some were deleted with the click of a mouse. So then, just like with Ghostbusters, the question is, who are you going to call? The answer's got to be Attorney Larry Schultz. Why? Because he plays hardball.
Thank you very much, and great to be here.
That's what it said in your ads. David, I know this one is for sure your very first one. When it comes to our next panelist, some say he's just a contrarian. No way, say others. Dude's a libertarian. Not being in any party is his new modus operandi. That's why we now say David Valente is a very proud GDI. That last part is independent. The first part is a combination of cuss words. That had to go around the room a little bit. Mr. Hornby. who's in the Mike Height seat, which I made the mistake of saying once this year, or actually 2 years ago.
And Mike Hornby took exception.
And on that theme, don't tell him he's in the Mike Height chair. You'll only get that I own it stare. Don't tell him he's in the Mike Height seat. He'll tell you he owns the chaff, the hull, and all of the wheat. So just in case you're not getting this and you're a wee bit slow, just remember, Mike Hornby owns the whole damn show.
That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome. What else can I say about them? If Ferretti was here, this would actually read better, but nevertheless, the spirit remains. What else can I say about this man that hasn't already been said? Like, don't waste shower water around him or you'll get the riot act read. That would surely rate as one of his best scoldings and rants, standing in that locker room with Joe Ferretti but without any pants. If he comes at you next, I recommend you stand strong and don't yield, and tell him you'll conserve water. Now go get dressed, Bill Stubblefield.
Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that from the very first time you met Joe Ferretti.
Yeah, that's right.
Giving him the riot act for wasting shower water.
Well, he was.
At the club.
He turned on the water and he left. He went to talk to people, undressed, the whole thing. It must have been 15 minutes he came back and the water was still running.
That time gets longer each time you tell this.
It'll be 30 minutes next time.
Is that a Pittsburgh thing?
Running
Leaving
the
the
water?
shower run all day?
I know my youngest son used to do it all the time. He'd be out in the hallway talking to everybody while that shower was running, and then the water bill would arrive.
I did not realize that time Joe was a high-powered lawyer. If I knew he could sue me, I might have been a little bit more reserved.
Speaking of Mr. Ferretti, he's usually our leadoff hitter. In his absence, Mr. Valente takes the role. You're up first, David. Go.
All right. So with two hurricanes that have rolled through in the last few days, and the news stories that we see coming out outside of the human tragedy from our political leaders, we've seen blame and indignation, and we see the Democrats talk about climate change and the Republicans talk about manufactured weather. It feels like what we're seeing is that our political leaders are more interested in scoring political points than actually doing anything of substance. It feels like we've gotten to a point in our political discourse that we just don't know how to help one another rather than just going to score political points. So have our political leaders jumped the shark and abdicated their responsibility towards helping one another versus scoring cheap political points to raise some cash?
All right, let's start first with the Admiral Bill Stubblefield. Billy?
Yeah, David, you've introduced a subject that, man, we could spend 3.5 hours talking about.
However, because of time constraints, we were limited to 16 and a half minutes.
We don't have that. You're right. I think it's a real shame that they were putting politics before the needs of the people or before the reality of what's actually happening. Climate change is real. Whether you want to believe it or not, it is real. We show that one of the reasons is that we're having more intense storms, is the atmosphere is much warmer. It can hold more moisture and therefore transport more moisture than you have the problem that we have in Florida and in the Carolinas. But the main thing is that the other element is FEMA. I've worked with FEMA in the past. They are a dedicated group of folks. Unfortunately, they're working on a budget less than what they need now, and not because they gave it to the migrants, but because the Congress did not appropriate as much money as they needed. And yet they're being challenged by not doing their job, by former President Trump and by Elon Musk. And that has been pushed back by the Republican governors in the various states, the Republican county commissioners in the various states, and said FEMA is doing a good job. But yet the image is they're moving back and away from their responsibility. I think this social media discourse that we have now is heading us in a very dangerous direction.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I can't disagree with all of what the Admiral just said, but I did recognize that he acknowledged the good efforts of the governors of the respective states, but there's two levels of response, and one is immediate in terms of protecting people who are in danger and recovering people who are injured, and then there's the major recovery of the infrastructure, and those are two totally separate efforts or issues, and how you do the second one is subject to some debate and obviously huge funding issues, but the immediate short term saving lives, I think it isn't really constrained by the budget. I think people understand that if that's your job, you're going to do what's necessary no matter what. You may not have all the resources back up to do the best you can, but you make the greatest effort.
Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I think that it's been a sort of truly shameful show by certain individuals on our political scene, literally making stuff up out of whole cloth, claiming that somehow the hurricanes were manufactured and stimulated by the government somehow. It's an absolutely ridiculous, and in this setting, shameful thing to do. Because out there somewhere are people, and I saw some footage this morning of a fella who was been clinging to an ice cooler all night long since the storm was over, and they finally found him offshore there in Florida somewhere. They're in now. He didn't get to hear the news, I'm quite sure. He's going to catch up on it now. But imagine if you've lost your home in North Carolina or Florida, and you've got to sort through this lying nonsense in the middle of an election. That's just going to add to your stress, which has got to be over the top to begin with. So it's really a shameful thing. And, I think that the governors of the states agree that FEMA is doing everything they can, and there's not been any complaints from those folks. All the rest of it is simply, I don't think it's social media. I think we have a group of Republicans led by one man who does not care what he says, whether it's true or not. And if he doesn't care, then what lie will help me the most is the analysis, not what will help the people of North Carolina or Florida, but what lie will help me the most. And he's hurting them directly.
Would that man be Donald Trump?
Yes, it would.
What did he actually say that hurt them?
Well, he led some of this nonsense about FEMA not doing their job. In
the initial phases of the North Carolina rescue, FEMA couldn't get there because the roads were washed out. So the people were doing it themselves. They were flying in helicopters. It's fact. People helped people. Civilians helped people. It was very much like the West Virginia.
Yes, they did.
But I'm speaking.
I didn't see Donald Trump doing
that. In the very beginning, in the North Carolina, FEMA was not there.
Right.
The National Guard was not there. People had to help themselves.
And Donald Trump claimed on national television that FEMA had given all the money to their illegals, and that's a ridiculous lie.
The facts are, and I'll just read it to you from CBS News. Back in 2023, Congress boosted the budget from $360 million to $650 million in fiscal year 24. The FEMA Shelter and Services Program, which gives grants to local governments and nonprofits to take care of undocumented migrants.
Right.
That is a fact.
That was the money that they put forward. Okay.
So they took taxpayer funds and gave it to undocumented migrants.
And that's in a separate fund than the emergency fund of FEMA.
It's still
separate.
Taxpayer dollars. That's what he was saying.
But no,
No, that's not what he was saying. He was saying they took the emergency relief
That-
funds
It still
and gave
came
it to
from
illegal
Federal
immigrants.
Emergency Management.
You can try to press this lie forward as far as you want.
I don't think
but
it's
we're
a lie at all.
hurting people
I think you're the
down
one
there.
pushing the narrative that it's a lie because you don't like Donald Trump.
Me and
We
a
know
lot of
that.
other folks who can see it.
To answer David's question, it's a month from an election. Both of them are politicking. Neither one of them are actually doing anything. We see Harris on her phone in the airplane, and then we see the person answering on the other side, and it's a manufactured video. These are all publicity stunts. It's a month from an election.
Mr. Stubblefield, you were trying to say.
Yeah,
Sorry, Bill.
I was going to say, yeah, and Mike Hornby is exactly right. There are both sides that try and take advantage of this. But you're wrong, Mike, in that the FEMA funds are not intermingled. They are two separate, different funds. They're appropriated differently, and you cannot arbitrarily take the money from one fund to the other fund without congressional approval.
My argument is it's still taxpayer money in the FEMA organization,
There-
whether it's a line item or not.
Yeah.
That is the argument. Why are we giving
But-
money to undocumented
No.
migrants and when we could be giving it to
But that's not- that's not-
if FEMA needs more, it's displaced the source of more.
But Mike, that was not the argument that's been made. The argument that's been made was you were taking the FEMA money to give to the migrants, and as opposed to giving it to those folks in North Carolina, and that was not true.
I don't think that was what he was saying. I think he was saying we appropriated money.
Hold on, Dave. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so, I mean, Republicans have told us for how many years that everything that's going on the border is an emergency. What better agency to deal with an emergency than FEMA to deal with the migrant crisis? So, yes, it seems appropriate that FEMA has a line item budget to deal with the migrant crisis and a line item to deal with the issues that are happening with the weather, with Asheville, North Carolina being essentially wiped off the map. Honestly, I don't care about politicians' opinions about cause and effect of things while we're still picking bodies out of the rubble. Like, there is a time for us to have those discussions, but now is not the time. Let's all pitch in together. Let's all work together to help these communities rebuild and get them on their feet. And then we've got time to discuss this stuff. But the politicization of this issue, and really every issue that we have, is not doing us any good. We are far more interested in, a poll number moving up or a political point being scored so that they can fundraise than actually helping people. And that should be the purpose of government. If we want this experiment to continue well, the purpose of this government should be to help people, and it's not to score cheap political points because some tragedies happen. And it's, again, it's not just this thing. Whenever there's a school shooting, we've got people making cheap political points while we're still picking bodies out of the classrooms. There's and it is both sides, and I know people hate when we talk about both siderism, but it is a feature now of our politics rather than a bug, and we need to fix this soon or we are going to spin spectacularly out of control.
From William Whittington, frequent commenter and listener, FEMA has two funding streams. One, Fund 90, which covers normal day-to-day operations, always underfunded and never enough to keep the staffing and IT and system infrastructure upgrades on track, which directly support disaster response and systems that support the staffing and claims intake process. Two, Stafford Act funding, which can only be used during disaster response official declarations. This is when FEMA gets healthy and uses these events to upgrade their infrastructure debt. Congress doesn't care about this wild, wild west mechanism of funding, so FEMA waits for disaster declarations to get well. Sad for FEMA and the taxpayers. I presume William has some knowledge of that directly.
I just think it comes down to the point that we are spending exorbitant amounts of money on illegal migrants, putting up in motels, hotels, giving them cell phones. And I fundamentally just think it's wrong.
Mike, you may well be right there, but where the real problem comes in, money from the hurricane relief was not being used to support the migrants.
Taxpayer money is taxpayer money.
That was flatly what he said, though.
That he's exactly right. He let them. He said that it was coming from the hurricane relief money for the migrants, and
He
that
did not
is
say
blatantly
hurricane
wrong.
relief. He did not say hurricane
yes,
relief.
Yes, he did.
No, he
yes,
didn't.
He did.
Well,
I disagree.
So if we take this out to its logical argument, then by saying that all taxpayer money is taxpayer money, then we could say that building highways is detracting from sending money to rescue people in the Carolinas. You could make that logical statement. I hate to bring that up, but it's a non-payday Friday, Mike, so I feel kind of safe in bringing this up.
Well, this is
next Friday. I'm pretty
this is all
safe right
coming
now.
from FEMA, right? Under that broad thing, this is where that pool of money is coming from. I just think it's fundamentally wrong. I think the citizens of North Carolina did a fantastic job. I thought the government was a little behind. They may be there now, but they are way behind. I think DeSantis did a fantastic job in Florida.
Mike,
preparation.
You mentioned, you left the impression that FEMA was sitting back and waiting for it to happen. That was contrary. They were already on scene, and sure, there were civilians using helicopters to come in, but FEMA was also providing aid with a helicopter.
I think
so. They were not sitting back doing nothing. They were on scene.
But
very
the helicopters
quickly.
weren't there for 4 or 5 days, Bill. They weren't there. When the actual guard got down there, they shut down the airspace so that the citizens who were helping people and who were rescuing people and who were going up there on mules, they said, "Hey, you got to stop the supplies. We'll take over from here." I understand that,
Yep.
but they weren't there for 4 or 5 days.
No, it was not 4 or 5 days, Mike. There had FEMA folks.
I've seen
on
it
the
myself.
ground very early.
I've seen it myself, but I was
You
in
saw it
touch.
when? You
I
saw
was
it
in
when,
touch
Mike?
with the Cajun Navy. I've been working with Travis Bishop trying to get all the supplies down there. He's leaving on Wednesday, I
More
believe.
power to Travis.
I've been talking to boots on the ground folks.
But you're leaving the impression that FEMA was doing absolutely nothing.
I
in
didn't
this
say they were
4 or 5
doing nothing. They weren't there in time. The citizens are the one we rely on our government too much to take care of us, and when things like this happen, it's the true citizens that come out and start saving each other.
Then why do we need FEMA then?
We need them to build the roads back, to do all the other stuff, to get these people's homes back who've been washed down the
If
road.
I'm there in desperation, I need somebody that I know is going to be coming to me as soon as they can get there, and that's what FEMA does.
That's what your neighborhood citizens do too.
Well,
That's
good.
what the
I'm not
community
saying,
does,
I'm not
too.
saying that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying. But what you're saying is we do not need FEMA.
I did not say that at all.
Well, you said except
I said
for
they weren't
except
there.
for building the roads.
Building the roads back, helping with rebuilding houses, paying for houses, helping with insurance. That's what
But they're
the federal
also
government
also
does.
bringing immediate needed supplies in as well.
We've also
The supplies are there.
We've also got a 2-term governor who's in the last part of his second term, Roy Cooper, in the state of North Carolina. And I've heard nothing but positive from him about the way FEMA has helped his people.
At the government level.
Yeah. No.
he's
At the
sitting in the
people
governor's
level.
office.
At the people level, Mike. And you heard the same thing from the
All
governor
right, I
of
got to
South
bring
Carolina.
this to a close
And-
because we're in our final minute, so it goes back to David Valente to wrap it up in 60 seconds. David.
Yeah, and FEMA got there, and yeah, there were issues with airspace, but remember, we were trying to bring in as much air traffic into an area as almost Hartsfield, Jackson, Atlanta airport levels into a single area. So what made sense to kind of get that under control so you didn't have people coming on top of each other. But yeah, the idea still stands that we've got to stop the political blame game while we're still picking bodies out of the debris. Give our first responders the chance to actually do their jobs rather than second guessing them from the moment something happens. And return to some level of civil political discourse that eventually we can have those discussions about difficult topics and what went wrong and what responses went wrong.
David, good stuff leading us off. A passionate discussion ensued. You did your job as the leadoff hitter.
There you go.
Top of the hour. It's Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg and TV 10. Friday 5, including via telephone David Valente filling in the Joe Ferretti telephone seat. David, thank you kindly, sir. Good to hear your voice again.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Also in studio, Mike Hornby, who not only owns the place this morning, is dominating the place. Ladies, it's like as a dog, he just came in and peed on the wall and said, "This is my turf."
After he cleared the cameras. Or he
Passionate about that subject. I'm sorry.
Michael Carl, the senior member of our crew, has returned as well. Good to see you, Michael.
Good to be here.
Chief antagonizer Larry Schultz. He loves to get your blood pressure going.
Oh, we do play hardball.
And leading off the second and final hour of the program today, the Admiral Bill Stubblefield.
Well, Rob, after a very engaged discussion that's introduced by the guy with the broken toe, must have been just pain radiating throughout the whole body, one of the things came clear is that we're so polarized. There is distrust with our government, distrust with parts of the government. It's been used as political foil as much as possible. We saw something like that on a different scale, but nevertheless, to me, a troubling scale in this last session, last week, special session. We had some of our Bill Redenhauer and Coop Gonzalez, along with 3 or 4 other folks, co-sponsored a resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 203, that says the West Virginia legislators shall not recognize an illegitimate presidential election or if there is election interference. They used as the basis for this as abundant evidence of illegal non-citizens registered to vote. Since 1996, it has been against the law in the U.S. for any non-citizens to vote. And U.S. News and World Report recently said that even though it may occasionally happen, it's incredibly rare. But what I find disturbing is that the resolution was posed in such a way saying that if, and they were very direct, if Trump loses the election, West Virginia should be paused not to recognize the election as being legitimate. Fortunately, their resolution never got referred to a committee, Judiciary Committee, and there is no anticipation that it'll ever get out of Judiciary Committee. So I think that the saner minds in Charleston prevailed, but still it's disturbing that we're still parroting what we heard last time the election was stolen, and there's a small group positioning themselves to say if Trump loses, it's going to be stolen again.
All right, let's talk with one of those minds in Charleston, Delegate Michael Hornby. I noticed your name was not on that bill. I assume you completely disagree with it then.
I believe that resolution also had language in it that said if a candidate was assassinated. I think that was specifically. I don't think it has a chance of passing. I did not co-sponsor it. However, I will speak about Bill. Bill is very passionate about what he does. He's got a long history of the CIA terrorist task force. He's been a Marine. He has some very strong feelings. I don't think it's going anywhere, Bill. It's one of those resolutions that he just spoke his mind, and that's how he feels. I feel like if Trump was assassinated, we wouldn't be dealing with a resolution. We'd be dealing with problems far worse than that. And I know there are some counties and municipalities across this country that do allow anybody to vote, not in the federal elections. I agree.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
In there,
New York City, for example.
New York City.
Yeah,
so
exactly, yeah.
there are some truths behind what he's saying. I disagree with it. I think if we're very polarized, and
we are.
It painted a picture in a time when we were trying to get some stuff done in a special session. It paints all of the GOP in one light, and I don't think that is fair.
Mr. Schultz.
As I listened to this, and I pulled up the resolution and read a good part of it during the break, the first thing that occurs to me that if you're going to undertake sort of a well, let's see who wins and we'll decide whether it was a fair election or not plan, then I think the first thing the West Virginia legislature should set itself up to do is give back the money that federal government gives us every single year. And that's not going to be done by a tax cut, let me tell you. That's going to require a giant increase in taxes on everyone. These people need to get a focus on exactly who pays for the highways in this state, to relieve disasters in this state. That's largely federal government money. And so if you're going to deny an election as an official act of the legislature, you ought to be prepared then to reach in your own pocket and pay the difference. And I don't think there's anybody in this state. I mean, the governor who's running for the Senate, U.S. Senate, can't even pay his own bills, let alone the rest of ours. So I just find it ridiculous. And what a signal about that lunatic fringe of 5 or 6 people who signed on to it. What a thing that is to say.
Mr. Carl.
Well, it had no practical significance whatsoever. It was simply a statement about making a point, which, there were merits in the point, but the implementation of it, the adoption of it, let alone the implementation of it, was just absolutely not possible. Won't happen. And so it's just it's a statement for discussion purposes, like we're doing here, but it had zero practical implications in the long run.
But what about the merits of it, Mike?
Well, the merits of it, I mean, the points that it made about political issues, I probably share some of them, but the implementation of the the implementation of the proposal is insane and will never happen and cannot happen.
Yeah, and the practical matter is, if it were to go into effect, it's treason or secession from the United. It's a secession from the United States. It would be treason, and that's just ridiculous.
And if I thought it would really pass, I'd oppose it because of the practical implications.
I predicted that you would, by the way, in the pregame discussion before you entered the room. Mr. Valente, you're up with your points to be made on this.
Yeah. So I mean, the interesting thing about this resolution is that it was absolutely one-sided. They would disregard the results of an election based only on if Donald Trump was assassinated. There was no mention that if the same were to happen with Kamala Harris, they wouldn't recognize the election of the Republican candidate for president. If there was election interference or vote fraud that occurred on the Republican side, there was no mention of disregarding the results of the election. I mean, I agree that this thing had no chance of passing the body, but it is very concerning that a local legislator proposed this, and that it wasn't an insignificant amount of legislators signed on to this sense the body resolution that really calls for some dangerous stuff for really just one side, and I think the idea of secession, we can debate the ideas and merits of secession, but whether that is a political right or not. But just because your favorite political candidate loses an election, legitimately is a very dangerous precedent to set.
But think about this from the standpoint of those who signed on to this bill, or this resolution. It's not a bill; it's a resolution, and about, I don't know, maybe up to 48 or 49% of the country at least feels this way at some point, and probably 35 to 40% of it ardently believes it as fact and truth, that the last election was stolen and that Biden is an illegitimate president. And they take this back from, I think, Mike, I'm not sure if this was on the air or off the air. This goes back to the victory in 2016 by Donald Trump and the reactions that took place
50% of the country that
across the
didn't believe he was a
country.
legitimate
And
president.
many said that he's not our president. This, in fact, you could say this goes back to Bush Gore when about half the country said Bush is not a legitimate president and doesn't deserve our support. Now, you think about this as it plays forth now for Trump, and I think the resolution talked about the 2 assassination attempts, which with some in that faction of the conservative wing of the Republican Party believe are manufactured attempts in a purposeful attempt as a conspiracy to take him out and make sure he can't be president. And they go back and then you look at the vote totals and you look at the questions in the different states. Never mind that none of those played out in the court. The fact of the matter is that simmering is still out there. And the fact of the matter is they're starting to look at this country as Venezuela and the Maduro election. And if it's not a legitimate election, then why should we recognize the person who won what we regard as an illegitimate election and has been for the last couple of cycles? And that's the mindset right now that's out there in a significant portion of this country. And it's not 5%. It's not the 5 delegates who signed on to it. There's probably a lot more that wanted to, but just decided politically it wasn't the smart thing to do. But that doesn't mean that there's not a larger significant proportion of this country that doesn't believe this stuff is fact right now. Whether you do or don't doesn't matter. It's the fact of the matter is it's about maybe 35-40% of the country believes that was an illegitimate election.
Rob, you phrased it very well. We were criticized on Facebook by some folks saying that it did not pass, it did not become a law. Why do we even discuss it on the round table?
Because we've got 2 hours to fill, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that.
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility at least to raise subjects that, as you point out, a sizable number of people in this community are sympathetic to that notion, and probably a comparable number of folks that are frightened of this movement. So we are deeply polarized, so what has been proposed through this resolution, even though we'll probably never see the light of day, reflects the mindset of a large number of folks, either pro or con. So.
Yeah. Anybody else with another comment on this one or the other?
Yeah, I think you phrased it perfectly, Rob. I think there is a large amount of people that think just like this, and I think Bill, even though I don't agree with it, he is putting what he truly believes into a resolution, and he does. I do think this is an inside job for the assassination.
Many people do.
Yeah, you keep saying assassination. It may be there, but there is at least 2 other parts to it, and that was the election interference and the illegitimacy of the election. So again, I'm not saying the assassination was.
I think that was a big part of it.
Okay.
I think that was the motivation for the resolution.
To me, all that last
the
part.
Subterfuge?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, David Valenta.
Yeah, why the subterfuge? I mean, now it's legal if Biden wants to take out Donald Trump. We can just call it an official act and wipe our hands and call it a day.
That's a SEAL Team 6. I guess the problem that this demonstrates is you could also introduce a resolution to change the law of self-defense, so that it becomes illegal for a person to defend themselves and their family against somebody who invades their home.
That is pretty much the law in many states.
Well,
you can introduce anything down in Charleston.
Right.
That's the thing. That's the freedom of it down
So
there.
the question is not so much the merits of it, but the level of insanity engaged in that would allow you or permit you to think that it was wise for you and us to introduce such a resolution and make that a part of the regular conversation. There's a whole bunch of self-defense laws in every single state, even the ones with the harshest gun laws, still recognize self-defense as a common law principle and a statutory principle in many states. And so it's like you're going to take away a fundamental thing and say, we're declaring, despite the 64 courts that said it wasn't true, or 63, whatever it was, we're declaring that we're not going to put up with this fake election stuff. Well, either you have faith in our constitutional system of government and the decisions of our courts, or you don't. You should be required to lead with that and say, since we don't trust the courts, here's our resolution. Go ahead. Admit that you don't trust our basic constitutional system. But this is just, this isn't just an opinion. This is kind of nuts.
Well, I think they don't trust certain states' voting.
Right. States they've probably never been to. Right.
No, I can't speak to that, but there,
But
that is a mistrust around there.
But with the electoral
big
college
cities.
system that we have right now, it's not going to make a lot of difference what the other states do, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 states. But
I think 4 or 5. I think
4 or 5,
I think 4 or 5.
But they're pretty
legitimately.
evenly split, north and south.
California's coming around. California and Maryland, they're coming around, right, Rob?
No, they aren't.
This whole incident is just a manifestation of the broad right of comment and opinion and raising it, but it also, the fact that it wouldn't get anywhere shows the strength, the deep faith of the mass of Americans, at every state and every legislature that don't change the basic system because they believe that overall it's working, and it's worked for coming on 200 years.
How about Georgia and their election laws, Mike?
What about them? I don't know.
Let me stop that now before we open a whole new turnip and get to issue number 3 with Michael Hornby.
So we just ended our second special session of the year. We passed 37 bills down there. I wanted to ask the panel, which bills do you think will affect the lives of West Virginians the most? And do you think any of these were truly an emergency?
This is assuming everybody had a chance to read all 37 bills, which I'm going to assume most haven't had that chance.
Don't you all follow us down there? I mean, you've seen them in the news, I presume.
I'm guessing that if I look around this room, I'm thinking, have you been reading all 37 bills?
I did send it out to all of you yesterday, so you could have done your research.
I started,
Mr. Schultz?
I started with House Resolution 203, and I was done.
You couldn't even find House Resolution 203, Larry.
I just did, yeah. Unfortunately, the internet does have a copy of that up there for our people to read.
Yeah, none of the other ones made the news, but that one did.
Right. So I'm not sure of all the bills that the House passed. What I'm more concerned with is what didn't come up. We still have only 80% of the CPS workers that the budget of the CPS of the DHHR calls for. And I know that we broke it into 3 pieces, and I'm wondering about how that drove the management cost up. Because, each of those pieces now has its own leader. And we tripled the administrative cost in order to allegedly smooth out this system. And when are we going to begin to pay CPS workers a wage that will allow us to recruit a full complement of them? This is one of my issues. These are the most endangered people in our state, children. And they are not being protected by CPS. Now, no fault of the folks who are at CPS. I don't mean to criticize them, because they are being handed an empty bag, and they need that bag filled up, and they need more staff. Until the legislature starts doing that, I really wish we would stop hearing about how pro-life our legislature is. You can't make a woman have a baby and then say, oh, by the way, if you abuse that baby, there won't even be a CPS worker in your county, as it is true in Morgan County. We're not going to protect that child for 1 minute after he's born, but you got to bear him. That makes no sense to me, and so I'm sorry if I sort of derailed this a little bit, but I don't have a particular bill I'm upset with. I have one that wasn't proposed and passed that I'm upset with.
And if you cannot tell, Mr. Schultz is an attorney who's used to addressing juries.
I was trying to be positive and say, which bills did you agree with? That's okay.
Mr. Carl.
Well, let me say that the restraint and that the legislature had in backing off of Justice's 5% income tax cut, which is all designed to offset the fact that he called for a huge tax increase when he first came to office, and it's all a political stunt. But they drew down the level of it so that it's a lot more responsible. So to me, that was the best thing they did.
In Justice's defense, the tax cuts passed now surpass the tax increase requested, so he's back to neutral or just above now.
Yeah, but he's going to brag about all the decrease and won't even admit the huge increase, and that in fact at one time was a lot more. In other words, it would have been more in 1 year than the phase-in reductions that the legislature finally were able to work out.
And Mr. Hornby, in defense of Mr. Carl's claims that tax cuts lead to generation of additional revenue, you have got some receipts with you, do you not?
Well, we did have a report from Larry Pack that said, we cut income tax by 21.5%, but the revenues are only down about 13.5%. So it is working. We are growing the base, if you will.
All right, Mr. Stubblefield.
Mike, I apologize when you say the 32 bills. I can only think of 2 bills that I'm aware of, and I think I follow what happens as much as the average citizen. I know about the reduction of income tax by 2%. I know about the child care. The rest of them, I have absolutely no idea what's there. So I cannot speak to the ones I'm happy with or less happy with because I don't know about it. What I would like to do is to take this as an opportunity, as a discussion you and I have had many times, mostly off air. I would like at the general session the legislators to take a hard examination of our education system and to see what we can do about it.
Mr. Valente, the final 90 seconds goes to you if you want all of them.
Yeah, so the one thing that I can point to that I'm okay with, because it's a topic very near and dear to my heart, is the increase in funding to the state veterans home. But the 2%, doesn't really do anything for me. I don't think we needed a special session to carve out an extra 2%. The child care tax credits and all that stuff are okay. But yeah, it was, I think, largely a waste of time and money that could have been done in a regular session.
Mr. Hornby, the wrap-up goes to you. You did not get the response you wanted.
I mean, that just goes to show people that are politically astute like you folks still don't pay attention to what anything goes down in Charleston. I do think that, or know what's going down in Charleston for that matter now. I do think the one bill that we did pass that was an emergency was the $10 million to the Agriculture, Commissioner of Agriculture for this drought to help some of these farmers, and that money will go directly to farmers, which I think was a great.
Now, I would agree with that, Mike. I didn't know about it, but I'd agree with it.
Didn't make the news because everybody was looking at Resolution 203.
All right, we got to get going here, and when we come back, Mr. Schultz, you are on the clock. Played this one for you, Mike. I know you like this too, right?
Oh, this is my jam right here.
Yeah. This segment of our program today brought to you in part by the Skinner Accident and Injury Attorneys at SkinnerWinds.com, by Orsini's Home Store, not just an appliance store any longer, at 360 Hack, Wilson Way, Martinsburg, and Orsini's.com. By Larry DeMarco and Company at Century 21 Modern Realty Results, and by West Virginia's premier DUI defense attorneys, the Wagner Law Firm. David Valente via telephone in the Joe Ferretti seat. We have the Admiral Bill Stubblefield peering directly across from me, imparting words of wisdom, and on occasion backhanding Mike Carl to keep him calm. Mike's used to that. They have breakfast together every Thursday.
Yeah, and that's when we really stay calm.
Yeah, right.
The mogul Mike Hornby here as well, and with issue number 4, Mr. Lawrence Schultz.
Yes, most of the issues that I listed, in fact, all 3 of them, have been discussed by me and others already. But I will bring this one up. from which state programs, and this is really just a question that I need information on, from which state programs did the legislature delete funds to pay for the tax cut that was just passed, 2%, all that it was?
Let's go directly to Mr. Hornby.
So, according to Larry Pack, we got 18 million of that. The total bill for 2% was about $46 million. So 18 million of it is coming from a bond that we've now paid off, and we no longer have to pay that. And the Department of Health, because of the split, is a little more efficient, and the rest of the money is coming out of the Department of Health. Where exactly, I don't know, but they said out of their $1 billion budget, they've got the additional funds in there because of the efficiencies that they have found.
Does that satisfy your question, Mr. Schultz?
That is not my answer. That is coming directly from the governor's office. How you want to deal with that is your...
Sure.
He put a big fence around him to protect himself.
I'm just saying.
The Department of Health, of course, because they've now broken it up, it's hard to say which of these three outfits does which job. Is the Department of Health...
between the combination of all three, they have found savings of the additional money. They're saying.
I had understood there were some changes to child care. They added a credit, for example.
Yes.
But, of course, that doesn't do anything for people who don't have a tax bill. A tax credit doesn't help anybody who doesn't pay any taxes. And, of course, our poorest people in this state who are on assistance don't pay any taxes, so the very poorest people will get nothing. They're already getting some things, but we didn't increase any of that, did we?
But they also get a whole bunch of subsidies and things during the year, too.
Sure.
From various state and federal programs.
No, I understand.
Yeah, that the other people who do pay taxes don't get.
Right. Okay. So how will that shake out for the average homeowner or a family owner, family person? Will the person on government assistance be doing better now than they would have, or will they be doing worse as compared to those other folks?
I don't think you can answer that because it doesn't affect that at all.
Okay.
It's 2%.
But some of them are getting a tax credit for child care, and some of them are not.
Just
some
like
of them
the
are getting
federal program.
a cut in federal or in state tax. Some are not. I'm wondering how that changes the balance between them. Did we make the poor poorer, I guess, is how that question shakes out.
I don't believe so.
Mr. Carl, you are the king of taxes in this state.
2 points. Thanks for the intro. Lower the rates, raise the revenues, and anybody who doesn't think there aren't tens of millions of dollars of waste in the government budget, even now, it's been curtailed, but even now is naive. So there was, it was something that was responsible, partly because of my first point, lower the rates, raise the revenues.
Mr. Schultz, I believe you've been accused of being naive.
Yeah, well.
Wouldn't be the worst thing he's been accused of.
Right, even today. I just think that we're going to have to wait and see whether we lower the rates and raise the revenues.
So, Larry, you're suggesting that we should just give money out to everybody?
I'm suggesting that when we change the allocations, we keep a laser-focused view on the very most vulnerable people in this state, who are the children of poor families.
What we did was we copied the federal program like 100% and made it 50% of the federal program. So not only are you going to get your tax credit from the feds, your child care credit from the feds, you're going to get a child care credit from the state in addition to that.
I understand.
If you haven't paid taxes, no, you will. It's not hey, I didn't pay any taxes, here's your money, but it will go against what you paid in taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understand. I understand what a tax credit is, but of course, a lot of the families who are most vulnerable have a tax credit doesn't mean anything to them because they don't pay taxes. Getting a lower tax bill.
I think
is
we're all in
impossible.
agreement on that. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
but that's a good thing.
all right. Well, here's the
In my
problem.
opinion.
Well, but here's the problem. Those kids who are whose parents pay no taxes, who are not the beneficiaries of a reduction and a better way of life, what are we going to do for them?
We have the Boys and Girls Club. We have schools. We have preschool. We have various federal and state programs that take care of these folks. We have the backpack program. We have many, many, many things that are taking care of kids between 0 and 4 years old.
Okay, but we're still in a position.
You just think the government should do that, whereas I think communities should do that.
Well, I think communities should do whatever they can, but I think there needs to be a recognition that sometimes it's not enough, especially in some counties in West Virginia, especially in states that have poorer areas. Those are our most vulnerable citizens, and they are also our future. And if we don't laser focus on those people, it's going to be disastrous.
I think to maybe rephrase Larry's question, is your greater question, should we be cutting taxes in a state where there are so many social programs that need more attention?
Well, certainly that was another one of my questions. And yeah, I mean, I've been talking about this not just today, but for ever since I've been on this show, back when it was 67% of CPS workers jobs were filled. And now they got it up to 82, and now we've fallen back to 80. It's ridiculous. They're the most vulnerable people in the state, and they are our legacy.
Mr. Valente, you can choose to attack that from whichever angle, sir.
Sure. I mean, so I don't disagree. I don't agree that we're making the poor poorer. It's not a finite pie. They're going to have the same that they had before. Yes, it's economically advantaged people.
See, no, hold on, David, your phone zapped out a second, or Mike Hornby is again controlling content on the program for things he disagrees with, which we all know he does.
That is not true, David.
So you're the one who's controlling the hurricane.
Yes.
So, it's not a finite pie. The poor are going to be at the same level that they were before. It's the those who have economic advantages, who make more money, will have more money. It's not a finite pie, but yes, I get why they went after the health budget, because that's where the money is. But I think that we should be taking a look at all levels of the state budget to identify areas where we can do things like fully staff our CPS workers so that they can help out for the foster care situation and things like that. That there is plenty of room for cutting the fat from the budget to actually go and help people that need it the most. To Larry's point.
Dr. McLaughlin just texted in, they need to clarify their Department of Health. It's actually the Department of Health and Human Services. It's not from the State Health Department that these funds are coming from. So just so we're clear on the specifics of where those funds go. Bill, did you go?
Yeah, I have not been. I think we need to look forward as opposed to looking back. And whether the child care, I'm sure that will benefit, whether it's going to be addressing the ones in greatest need or not, I don't know. But I think we need to look forward. This last session, the reduction in income tax took a lot of the energy in the room. That has been done at this point. So I would like to see the legislators look at as I mentioned earlier, the fundamental problems that we have with education, the fundamental problems we have with child protective services. We have some major issues in the state that we have only been given token attention to.
All right, everybody get a chance to comment? In that case, we go to issue number 5, and for that, Mr. Michael Carl.
I have just a objective question.
Uh-oh.
Which will do more to help Kamala Harris's voting totals, her defending the Biden administration record or calling for changes?
Mr. Schultz?
Sure. I think that's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. That's the same thing that any VP running for the number one slot would face. Some things work, some things don't. I don't think you'll see her messing around very much with the policies that drove this low unemployment rate. I do think there will be some things she will try to do to ease inflation more than it's been eased already, and that's certainly possible. But one of the things that happens when your economy booms and your stock market goes up over 40,000, up to 42,000 or whatever it was the other day, is that has a tendency to drive up some prices. Also, of course, as we're constantly reminded by the anti-deficit Republican Party, running $8.2 trillion in deficits in 4 years can also drive inflation. So, yeah, she can pick and choose. That's the beauty of her being in the race. She doesn't have to run on every inch of that, or she can criticize it or go against certain policies by simply saying we need to modify them a little bit. If she knows how to run for president, and it appears that she does, she's already doing it.
Mr. Valente?
Yeah, I largely agree with Larry. I think it's going to be a case-by-case, issue-by-issue basis. But I do think that it will help her to really differentiate how a Harris administration will be different from a Biden administration. I think there are still skeptical independents that kind of need that information of, if we elect Kamala Harris to be president, how is this going to be different than a Joe Biden administration? Setting herself out as her own person to rather than a continuation of the Biden presidency will I think seal the deal for a lot of independent suburban voters that will really drive the results of this election. And I do think that she's done a relatively good job so far in doing this balancing act of how Biden has done well from her perspective and where things can be improved with the Harris administration. Again, we're less than a month away from the election, thank the Lord, and we've the people already voted in the election.
We're losing David again, so it may go to you, Bill Stubblefield.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, implicit in Mike's question is that the Biden administration has been a dismal failure, and a lot will agree with
It was an
yeah.
objective question. I didn't say it at all.
Okay,
But it was implied,
It
and
is
I agree with
implied.
that.
That's right, it is implied. But yet, if you look at the numbers, there has been a lot of a positive that's emerging out of it. One, crime is down, especially in most of the major cities. Crime rate is down. That's statistically demonstrated. Second is we have the inflation is down. We have not had deflation, so it's not above COVID. But the COVID, I think, product was driven by policies put in place for both Trump and Biden. But inflation is down, and we've done that with a soft landing. We have not gone into the recession. The economy as a whole is doing very well. We're the strongest economy in the world, and especially if you look at folks coming out of the COVID, we have done much better than any other economy. China, when we compare to, China is in real economic problems just now, and we have done very well. So you can give credit, or you can ignore the credit, either way. Immigration is I think everybody acknowledges, probably even Biden acknowledges, he was slow in taking action. But the action he took 6 or 7 months or so ago, I think, is having a positive result. International relations, we have a much better international relationship with our European colleagues, our Japanese, Australian colleagues than we had before. So you can casually dismiss and say the Biden administration is a failure. And I think that's what was being implied. But statistics will argue the opposite.
Mr. Hornby?
So since I control hurricanes and I'm the only delegate that is down there making a $200,000 salary with a free car, free gas, and free insurance, I have the last say on this. So
you're denying this or accepting this as fact?
Oh, he's stated it as a fact.
I knew it.
We can go forward from here.
all my colleagues are very jealous of me, but it's just because I'm more important than them. So
I agree.
And on this panel, obviously, I'm definitely, I sit here with Mike on the conservative side,
the wise one.
And the liberals over there. I think she's in trouble with the immigration issue. I think you can cite any liberal study you want. I think crime is rampant. When you stop studying and you just, maybe stop arresting people, your numbers go down. I think any American citizen right now who walks into a grocery store besides Bill Stubblefield and buys eggs knows that the price is doubled, buys milk, knows that the price is doubled. The rampant spending is crazy, and yes, West Virginia, we suck on that teat like crazy. So it is what it is. But to answer your question, I don't think she can hide. CBS 60 Minutes finally jumped the shark. The most respected journalistic show out there, with the last investigative one, is now editing her answers to make her look better. That came out yesterday. It's just, she can't hide anymore. And the more she goes on TV, the more people are going to realize how inept she is. And that's my opinion.
Does it come back to Mr. Carl? Yes, it does. I think we've gone through the panel here. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, whichever path we think she's taken, she's not doing very well with it, and also to one of the points Bill brought up, the most recent, like earlier this week, report is that inflation is back up. So that's not going to be something she can brag about or even want to mention. So she's got a real challenge, and I'm glad I'm not.
Inflation back up to 2.5%, Mike.
But that's over last year. Yeah, so you got to include the 8% from the year before and the 6% from the year before and the 6% from the year before.
You're exactly right, Mike. But the point I was trying to make is
they've made the correction.
And the fact that the inflation, that the huge inflation we had was a product of, I think, the very necessary action in both administrations, both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. Let me finish very quickly, because we had COVID that was destroying our country. We had to take corrective action.
He didn't have to shut the pipeline down on day one. And that was the first catalyst for this massive inflation.
The pipeline, the oil pipeline?
The oil pipeline. And we didn't have to stop drilling day one. That energy policy that he had day one was what drove the massive inflation that for the rest of it. I will agree with you. There was some inflation because of COVID and supply chain. However, that decision on energy policy on day one for Biden is what really drove.
I've never heard anybody say that before, Mike.
Well, you just heard it from me.
I know, and so that's why I'm telling you.
And I told you at the beginning, I am in charge and I'm right.
And I'm embarrassed that I overlooked it.
I'm glad that Bill mentioned China, though, because there is one other thing. It's come out in the last couple of days that the Trump Bibles that are for sale for $60 a piece, there were a lot of them were printed in China.
We get a lot of our products from China, Larry.
Yeah, well, he's a guy who says that they ought to have tariffs on them. We just don't want
their virus.
Yeah.
He probably put a tariff on them, too.
So, this was initially part of my intro for the Week in Review, how the inflation numbers were addressed yesterday. So I got this from two different websites, two different reports yesterday from two different agencies. And I'm not going to tell you which ones they were, but suffice it to say they both addressed the 2.4% number of inflation. One of them read, inflation falls to 2.4%, lowest in 3 years. The next headline said, inflation at 2.4%, higher than expected.
Welcome to America.
So there it is. There it is right there. We can't even look at math the same way anymore. That number right there.
Post-truth society.
Go ahead, David. What'd you say?
We're in a post-truth society.
Right. So you have a math number there of 2.4% inflation and two different ways of addressing it. And depending on which side you want to win depends on which of those headlines you loved reading more yesterday when that came out. Right? So I'm not here to tell you how to solve that problem. It's not my job. My job is to fill 2 hours every day, baby. And I just came really close to doing it with 3.5 minutes to go. All right? Hey, hang out. We've got final thoughts coming up, too. You get 8 seconds apiece. Don't waste a single one of those 8 seconds. They are precious, ladies and gentlemen. They are all part of the 2 hours. Final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece. David Valente, go.
Even though the Sabres disappoint me, I'm glad to have NHL hockey back.
I agree, Mr. Schultz.
Apple butter, Berkeley Springs, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Be there. The weather's going to be beautiful.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Let's follow Brad Knowles' advice and get out and enjoy the lovely October weather.
Mr. Carl.
Go Commanders, your worthy successors to the Redskins.
Mr. Oh, wow, you come around, Mr. Hornby.
Apple Harvest Festival next week.
Boy, I'll tell you what, no controversial final thoughts in there whatsoever.
Oh, yes, I'm just challenging Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Dave Ramsey's show is coming up next. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg and TV 10. We'll talk to you again in 70. Short